If you think rock stars lead crazy lives, wait till you hear about their most famous groupies. You might even recognize a few names from your favorite songs.
Understanding the 70s era groupie begins by coming to terms with an uncomfortable fact. Age didn't matter, to the point where some were known as baby groupies. When she sat down to talk to Thrillist, groupie mainstay Lori Maddox described being in junior high when a friend introduced her to Sable Starr, who was already popular on the groupie scene by the time she was 14 years old. Maddox remembered, "She was so glamorous, totally one of a kind, wearing scarves for shirts and going topless without hesitation. I had not yet turned 15, and David Bowie wanted to take me to his hotel room. She says she wasn't ready then, but 5 months later, Starr and her sister were both involved with Iggy Pop, yet lusting after Bowie. And this time, Maddox says that when Bowie requested her presence at dinner and afterward in his bedroom, she agreed.
David drops the kimono off and says, "Can you wash my back?"
As for Starr, by 14, she was a stable at the Whiskey A Go-Go and a favorite of Jimmy Page. When Thrillist talked to Lori Maddox about being a sexually active groupie when she was still a young teen, she stressed that she didn't see anything wrong with it, saying, "I was an innocent girl, but the way it happened was so beautiful. Who wouldn't want to lose their virginity to David Bowie?" Fellow groupie Pamela Des Barres said similar things in an interview with The Guardian, saying that she was proud of Maddox for the way she handled all the negativity and explaining, "Yeah, she was young, but it was our reality and everyone was okay with it." Des Barres, too, says she has no regrets and even considers herself a pioneering feminist.
I took my birth control pill out of my purse and took it in front of people on the Sunset Strip, which is feminism.
Others strongly disagree. Dr. Rosemary Lucy Hill of the Center for Interdisciplinary Gender Studies at the University of Leeds told The Guardian that even if young women went into the world of the groupie with the mentality that all sex was consensual, the power imbalance makes it difficult. She explains, "Some people think it's never a free choice because of all the expectations. I think both of these things are true at the same time, and that makes it really complicated." Between groupies and the rock stars they followed back in the 70s, perceptions likely differed. Speaking with Thrillist about Jimmy Page, Maddox said, "He mesmerized me. I fell in love instantly. At that point, I was 15 and totally in love with this man. I put him on a pedestal." On the other hand, Page told journalist Ellen Sander, "Everybody knows what they come for, and when they get there, they act so special. I haven't got time to deal with it." Page was far from the only one to think less than highly of groupies.
It's kind of like being at a buffet where everything is laid out, and you don't have to take this or this or this, but it's all there to be eaten if you want it.
Even 70s-era boy band the Bay City Rollers look back on their groupies with a sort of shrug and a laugh. In a 2015 conversation with the Irish Mirror, Les McEwen shared that he'd found his decades-past relationships with groupies ultimately unfulfilling, saying, "You realize that all that stuff is a bit shallow compared to the depth of the relationship you have with your wife." He joked that they'd had girls lined up in every city. According to bandmate Stuart Wood, "One in every port," that was the expression. Groupie Cherry Vanilla insists she never felt forced to do anything, but not all 1970s-era groupies had the same experience. Morgana Welch was one of the underage LA-based groupies known as the LA Queens. In Legs McNeil and Gillian McCain's punk oral history, Please Kill Me, Welch talks about how incredible she found the music scene at the time, but admitted that the musicians were surrounded by unknown hangers-on who were looking for the same perks provided to the rich and famous. Welch said, "A lot of girls buddied up. In a way, it felt a little safer because you had somebody. You didn't always want to go alone." But that didn't always work. Welch and her friend Tyler were kidnapped, arrested as sex workers, drugged, and sexually assaulted. Groupie Bebe Buell famously became the mother of Steven Tyler's daughter Liv. According to her memoir Rebel Heart, she was pregnant and torn between Tyler and her old flame Todd Rundgren when Tyler's behavior became so erratic that it terrified her. She saw him have a massive seizure, recover the following morning, and use cocaine again that evening, recalling, "I'm really scared. I whispered to Todd over the phone, 'Help me get out of here. I have to get away from this guy.'" It makes sense that some of the most devoted groupies of the 1970s were artists themselves, and perhaps the most famous was Cynthia Plastercaster Albritton. Her decades-long career of creating plaster casts of rock star genitalia started with an art class assignment, and continued with the realization that not only did having a gimmick get her noticed, but it got her interacting with the scene's biggest stars in a completely different way.
My art teacher told me to make a plaster cast as my homework assignment of something that could retain its shape.
That gimmick earned her Frank Zappa's patronage, but not participation. While she initially relied on the help of other groupies to prepare stars to have casts taken, she eventually moved along to enlisting the help of significant others. Albritton says that the interaction that came with the project was a unique insight into the perception of the groupie. She admitted, "I was just doing it to get laid because I was goofy." While Albritton says her work was largely positive, she saw the dark side of being a groupie too. Describing her encounter with Led Zeppelin, she said, "It was a horrible experience. They had a condescending attitude to some of the girls, coupled with a violent streak. Most bands have been humble, feet on the ground, and not blatant megalomaniacs. While fans see only the image rock stars project, groupies see way more, for better or worse. Gail Sloatman Zappa was a 1960s groupie turned 1970s rock star wife. When she was interviewed by fellow groupie Pamela Des Barres for her book Let's Spend the Night Together, Zappa spoke about what she called the groupie state of mind, in which girls were in it for the lifestyle. She explained, "They took groupiedom to a whole other level that you might call professional. Groupies who just got lucky, girls servicing the band. Then there were the desperate ones servicing the crew or anyone near the band, cousins, road managers, whatever." But Gail Zappa felt something else. She had always felt like an outsider, until a party for the up-and-coming Rolling Stones introduced her to an entirely different scene than what she'd grown up with. She said that it was the idea of being understood, breaking free of constraints, and making her own way in the world that really attracted her to the life of a groupie. In her autobiography, Take Another Little Piece of My Heart, Pamela Des Barres wrote about the discovery that it wasn't always about sex. She recalled Mick Jagger inviting her back to the hotel after the ill-fated concert at Altamont. She hadn't realized that he wanted to talk about the concert and his thoughts of walking away from music.
Who's fighting and what for? Why are we fighting?
Des Barres also wrote of her experiences with Keith Moon, who was haunted by a January 1970 accident in which he hit and killed his driver in escaping from angry pubgoers. She later told Louder Sound that after the accident, Moon had become deeply unhappy, recalling, "He said a lot of times, 'I don't deserve to live. I'm a murderous screaming and wailing in the middle of the night. You'd have to comfort him and give him lots of Placidyls to make him go back to sleep." She's been candid, too, about the fact that the life of a groupie isn't all glitz, glamour, and limousines. Toward the end of her memoir, she wrote of the friends she'd lost, a beloved companion and confidant named Beverly to a heroin overdose. Rock gods she considered friends included Keith Moon, Jimi Hendrix, Mama Cass, and Graham Parsons. She wrote about almost ruining her own health, worrying about others, saying that in the end she'd come to a heartbreaking conclusion. There was nothing I could do. Some groupies were invited into the perfectly ordinary, everyday lives of the rock stars with whom they hit it off. In her memoir, I'm With the Band, Pamela Des Barres wrote about meeting Gail Zappa and being fascinated with the idea that even rock stars like Frank Zappa could have families, drink tea, and eat breakfast in their own kitchens. Gail offered her friend a job as nanny for their daughter Moon and son Dweezil. Remembering how she moved in with the Zappas in Laurel Canyon to take care of the kids, Des Barres wrote, "The love I felt for them was different from any other kind. I didn't want a single thing from those munchkins, and it was a refreshing relief. I hung out with them because I had to, but found out real soon that I also wanted to." Morgana Welch has also spoken about the ordinary side of being a groupie. Speaking with Please Kill Me, she said groupies' contributions to the music scene were never appreciated. She recounted cooking for countless bands, saying, "I had certain recipes like these massive stir-fries where I could feed the band and the roadies for $5. They were always so grateful because they were broke and starving. So in a way, a lot of groupies were doing things to help these guys stay alive while they did their music." Being a groupie in the 1970s meant trying to get noticed by one's rock star of choice, which meant getting creative with fashion. Morgana Welch explained to Please Kill Me that our art was fashion, ambient art. Thrift stores were groupies go to as it allowed them to piece together outfits with complete control and no limit to creativity. Pamela Des Barres spoke with Vogue about the groupie fashion sense, saying, "I just wanted to be understood by the way I looked." She recalled spending hours putting on makeup and decorating herself with sequins, saying, "I wanted to express myself along with all these people I admired so much." She added that part of what she did as a groupie was take bands shopping and even make them some of the clothes that ultimately shaped their style. At the forefront of that was Anita Pallenberg, who is widely credited with changing the entire look of the Rolling Stones as they stepped into the 1970s. Keith Richards even gave her a shout-out in his memoir Life, saying, "I started to become a fashion icon for wearing my old lady's clothes." It's impossible to talk about what it was like to be a groupie in the 1970s without talking about Cameron Crowe's iconic Almost Famous. The film was based on his experiences as a music journalist at the time, but Des Barres told Vulture that's its problem. She explained that being a groupie was all about feminism and the female agenda, and the fact that the movie is told from the perspective of a male journalist omits that whole side of it.
We are not groupies.
This is Penny Lane, man. Show some respect.
Des Barres says, "The film is a horribly misogynistic look at what a groupie muse is. This character, the groupie like she's portrayed, is pathetic." Des Barres takes particular issue with Penny Lane's suicide attempt, saying that no true groupie would have been so tied up in the idea of the man. Instead, she says it was always about the music. Among the problems Des Barres had with Cameron Crowe's Almost Famous were the bus scenes. She explained, "I was a groupie before there were bus trips. I was on jets, but that was too cutesy and too clean for what really would have happened in that bus had I been on it." For many, touring with the band meant getting a ride on the Boeing 720B, dubbed Starship One. The jet was first chartered by Led Zeppelin in 1973, and it retired just 4 years later after hosting Peter Frampton. Those years in between, though, it saw a lot. The general vibe of the plane could be summed up by the image of band names spelled out on the bar in lines of cocaine, and a bedroom complete with a well-used waterbed. When Alice Cooper leased the plane, nightly activities would be recounted in the form of ball scores. Deep Purple chartered the plane too, and according to what manager Bruce Payne saw, it was one of the band's go-to methods for courting groupies. Payne said, "Fathers 2 states over were calling the cops. Parties went on 24/7 no matter what the city, and drummer Ian Pace of Deep Purple loved every minute, remembering, 'The Starship was a great place to join the Mile High Club.'" Pamela Des Barres told Fashion that she's been on a quest to take back the word groupie from anyone who might use it to paint a picture of one-dimensional sex-obsessed women throwing themselves at rock stars. And even though Des Barres might condemn Almost Famous as a shallow depiction of what their lives were like, it's not entirely wrong.
Don't you think you could be doing something else?
This is what I want to do. This is what I've always wanted to do.
Just sleep with rock stars?
And their crews.
In fact, Crow's film depicts precisely what Des Barres has been saying. Penny Lane starts talking to the young journalist character inspired by Cameron Crowe and gets him access to the band. According to Dr. Paula Harper, a postdoctoral fellow in musicology at the University of Washington in St. Louis, that was pretty regularly a part of the groupie's life. Harper went on to explain that groupies knew all the places to be seen and who was going to be having the best parties. When out-of-town bands showed up for a few shows, it was the groupies who made connections. Harper goes as far as to suggest that not only were they acting as adept and experienced PR people, but that if their work had been carried out by a man, they would have gotten paid. Take Gail Zappa. She hadn't yet married her famous husband when she and her groupie friend traveled to California, taking the Who's My Generation to one radio station after another. She said that although it was all in fun, they ended up breaking the record into radio play, and that's the sort of thing people normally get paid for. Des Barres believes that there's absolutely nothing wrong with the type of groupie who's just out to add notches to their bedpost, stating, "You're not hurting anyone. If that's what you want to do it."
We'd wander around the backstage area, and then one thing would lead to another.
But here's the thing. Some of the wives and girlfriends of rock stars have spoken out about the harm that the groupie lifestyle has done to them. When Des Barres interviewed groupie-turned-wife Gail Zappa for her book, Let's Spend the Night Together, Zappa confirmed that yes, her husband was a huge fan of the groupie sex scene even after they were married, and it absolutely bothered her. Zappa recalled, "Well, everyone had groupies. I mean, you couldn't get around them. There were aspects that were not easy and not fun, and it's not like you could be consoled or cry on his shoulder over it, but what doesn't kill you makes you stronger."
Girls that will readily admit that they are groupies have a very special sort of mentality, and they aspire to that position.
Franca Wright shared her heartbreaking story to the Daily Mail. Longtime wife of Pink Floyd keyboardist Rick Wright, she confronted her husband and his groupie of choice, only to learn that the groupie was expecting his child. The news came immediately on the heels of Franca's 4th miscarriage. Those miscarriages, she said, came because she flew along with him when he toured. Wright said, "If I wasn't there when he wanted me, then he would find another woman to put in his bed." According to Morgana Welch, she would go back to the days of free love and baby groupies in a heartbeat. It's an era that could never be replicated, and she explained that the reason for the change was twofold. After the AIDS crisis and the emergence of cocaine as a drug of choice, Welch says, "We went from expressing yourself to feeding the ego." She added that she had gotten clean, saying, "I don't want to be out of it, I want to be there for it." It's something that other groupies grew into feeling as well. Pamela Des Barres told Big Issue that if she had any advice for her younger self, it would be to lay off the drugs, saying, "The early drugs were fine, pot and acid, mescaline and all. Then it sort of denigrated into cocaine and pills and stuff. I tell her to avoid some of that because there are things I don't remember because I was so high." In Rebel Heart, Bebe Buell also told some terrifying stories about drug use. In one, another groupie who was dating Alice Cooper at the time had given her elephant tranquilizers. She writes, "I called Todd Rundgren on the phone as I was starting to die." She told another story of swearing off heroin for life, writing that it was such a bad experience that she had no doubts that she was never going to touch it again. Throughout its history, the fans rock music attracts have been almost as notorious as the artists, but only the most dedicated fans earned the title groupie, and by the 1980s, their lifestyles became the stuff of legend. Many groupies have spoken glowingly of their experiences backstage, though many artists had fairly different approaches to their relationships with their female fans. While Kiss singer Paul Stanley claimed to worship women during a 1988 Oprah interview, his bandmate Gene Simmons claimed to have gotten into rock mainly for access to women. Others haven't been quite so complimentary. In fact, some of the same women who fondly recall their groupie eras also admit that they routinely faced misogyny. As Roxana Shirazi plainly put it in her memoir, The Last Living Slut, a female is not defined in terms of her humanity, but in terms of her sex life. These women, Shirazi argues, are treated poorly for wanting to have sexual encounters, while men are lauded for doing the same. That attitude permeated the world of rock and roll for a long time, and as Shirazi told the Muses podcast, the misogyny she encountered in the music scene beginning in the 1980s persists to this day.
Their approaches towards women, it's really like, no, women have to have a specific designated role, but men have a different role.
Bebe Buell, who was most active as a groupie in the 1970s before moving on to a music career in the 1980s, spoke damningly of the pervasive misogyny applied to groupies in an interview with Stay Thirsty. She reflected, "I get really angry at these people who dismiss these girls as whores or groupies or crappy labels they want to throw at them. They were more than that." In many quarters, the image of the groupie is exceedingly shallow, based largely on the concept of women indulging in a variety of physical encounters and illicit substances. If that were always the case, however, we wouldn't have the stories of big-name groupies like Pamela Des Barres or the groupie phenomenon at all. If the life of a groupie was marked by as much superficial interaction as some generalizations would lead you to believe, the community would not have been so active for so long. While no one can rightfully speak for all groupies, who did often have to navigate misogynistic environments and people who routinely dismiss them as shallow hangers-on, sometimes the experience provided real benefit. A 2014 study published in Sexuality and Culture found that groupies in the 1980s metal subculture reported plenty of sexual encounters and instances of drug usage, but also found community and artistic fulfillment in their encounters. Moreover, those who were included in the study reported having fairly normal middle-class lives, and looked back on their admittedly risky behavior as use with affection. That sentiment was echoed in an early 90s interview with Connie Hamzy, who was also known as Sweet Sweet Connie after a call-out in a Grand Funk Railroad song partially written about her. Speaking to Joan Rivers for the comedian's NBC talk show, Hamzy denied having shallow, sex-only relationships with musicians and crew members in past years.
They're my dearest friends. They're basically my family.
By the 1980s, the figure of the groupie was well established, but consent certainly wasn't the topic of conversation it is today. Some situations to many people were clear-cut problems, such as when underage teen girls entered the groupie realm and began performing very adult acts with very adult men. Lori Maddox, a teenage groupie in the 1970s, now has complicated feelings about her time with rock musicians, telling The Guardian, "I wouldn't want this for anybody's daughter." Meanwhile, Roxana Shirazi told The Guardian that, while she felt she was in control of her sexuality, the power dynamic between musicians and groupies was always slanted in favor of the artists. For the wildly popular 1980s band Motley Crue, groupie consent was seemingly taken for granted. In the book The Heroin Diaries, A Year in the Life of a Shattered Rock Star, Jason Bryce, who briefly traveled with the band as a photographer's assistant, recalled one 1987 incident in which bassist Nikki Sixx told a groupie she had to perform a sexual favor for the then 16-year-old Bryce in order to hang with the band. She did, but it's doubtful she was there to make a connection with an unknown teen. Sixx has also claimed to have sexually assaulted a woman who was so intoxicated she couldn't give consent, implicating Motley Crue drummer Tommy Lee in the same incident. Yet Sixx has also insisted to Rolling Stone that all of Motley Crue's encounters with groupies were consensual. Much of the interplay between musicians and groupies was based on a single heteronormative setup of male musicians and female groupies. Female rockers often complained of the lack of male followers, and singer Susanna Hoffs of 1980s pop rock group The Bangles noted that even when men made it backstage, things didn't go much further than flirting. Yet that wasn't always the case, and male groupies did exist in the 1980s, even if they were exceedingly rare. One example, Ian Wagner, was better known by the colorful moniker of Pleather. Interviewed by fellow groupie Pamela Des Barres for her book Let's Spend the Night Together, Backstage Secrets of Rock Muses and Super Groupies, Wagner noted that as a child, it took him some time to realize that female rock musicians were the exception, not the norm. In time, however, he became something of a fixture in the scene. Beginning in the late 1980s, when he was as young as 15, Wagner toured and spent intimate time with all-female acts like the Pandoras, the Screaming Sirens, and Courtney Love. Yet, like female groupies, Wagner told Des Barres that things weren't always easy, and that he had complicated feelings about his past experiences. He reflected, "I did get treated badly by a lot of them. There isn't a single woman that I hold anything against. It was an honor for me to be around them for the short amount of time I was." In the 1980s, drugs of multiple varieties might have been offered up as a way to relax and get in with the band, but they could also take a serious toll on groupies. Writing in her memoir, groupie Chris O'Dell said that her substance use became so serious that she can't remember large stretches of time in the late 1970s and into the 1980s. In 2009, O'Dell told ABC News that she stopped using in 1988 after previous attempts at getting clean were derailed by peer pressure and accusations of being boring. Others were not quite so fortunate, however. In previous decades, some groupies had died from drug overdoses. Famously, Christina Fernka, more widely known as Miss Christine, died in late late 1972 of an overdose when she was only 22 years old. Perhaps most notoriously, groupie Kathy Smith, who was associated with musicians like Gordon Lightfoot, had become a drug dealer by the 1980s. She gave comedian John Belushi the fatal mix of heroin and cocaine that killed him in 1982, reportedly administering it herself. In 1986, Smith pleaded no contest to the charge of involuntary manslaughter for her part in Belushi's tragic death. By the early 1980s, it was clear that a new and deadly disease was circulating worldwide. Initially, many assumed that the disease, which seemed to attack a person's immune system and open them up to any number of infections, was limited only to members of the LGBTQ community. Yet, as the 1980s wore on, it became increasingly difficult to deny that HIV and AIDS represented a serious health problem for everyone, though harmful misconceptions and stereotypes about who got HIV/AIDS and how they contracted the virus spread for decades. By the mid-1980s, many understood that the virus was passed through sexual activity and shared needle use. Yet it wasn't always clear that rockers and groupies were worried about infection. Even in 1988, Gene Simmons admitted to Oprah that he had connected with upwards of 2,000 women.
The reason we first started strumming guitars is because we wanted women, and lots of them.
In 1991, Ozzy Osbourne told the Los Angeles Times that he understood contracting HIV/AIDS was a real possibility, that it changed how he interacted with fans and groupies, saying, "I don't mess around at all, but in the past I have. We all have. It haunts me." Even then, Osbourne and other musicians interviewed by the newspaper noted that some groupies were so intent on connecting with famous rock stars that infection worries didn't seem to cross their minds. While 1980s rock might have presented itself as the realm of boundary-pushing, fun-loving rebels, it also presented real barriers to creative women. Even Ian Wagner told fellow groupie Pamela Des Barres that he saw his relationships with female rockers in gendered terms. He reflected, "I've subconsciously set up my entire life to take on the traditionally feminine role in relationships. When I say feminine, I mean the person who is seen as weaker to the outside world, but is really the one making things happen. Women make the world go round, but the men take the credit." Wagner hinted at the broader notion that women were more likely to be categorized as groupies, which allowed others to dismiss them without allowing for their role in the creative music-making process. As Gretchen Larson argues in Organization, this persistent othering shored up the stereotype of women as mere fans who only consume and never create. Thus, it was often all too easy for groupies of the 1980s and other eras to be relegated to the role of hangers-on and not artistic forces in their own right. While some groupies weren't taken seriously by others, many weren't about to let that stop them. Pamela Des Barres even claimed that she was a muse for big-name musicians like Keith Moon of The Who. She later told Salon that groupies in general weren't merely sex objects, but friends, helpers, assistants, and guides. For some, it was possible to transcend that supporting role and become musicians in their own right. In 1983, rock scene staple Cherry Vanilla, who was once a famous rock groupie who had partied with the likes of David Bowie, told Ryan Keating that she found great purpose and fulfillment in her varied creative work as a publicist, actor, writer, and musician.
I love every part of show business.
Meanwhile, Bebe Buell has continued making music well into the 21st century. Earlier in her career, she even hit it off with rock legend Patti Smith, with whom she traded poetry that would eventually transition into the 1980s as Buell's songwriting and performing career. Debbie Harry, the lead singer of Blondie, has even described herself as a former yet powerful groupie in her own right, and she proceeded to make history on par with many of her punk and new wave peers. For much of the 1980s, it must have seemed like the groupie lifestyle was going strong, yet the rise of a new genre may have taken a considerable amount of shine off the groupie image. It's not that grunge bands didn't have adoring fans who wanted to get very close to musicians. According to Louder, ahead of making Nirvana's third and final studio album, In Utero, record producer Steve Albini told the band that they had to eschew drugs and groupies while recording. This direction hinted that at least the occasional groupie made an appearance around the band. Meanwhile, other 90s groups certainly had groupies, and individuals that were active during the 1990s and beyond. Yet some speculate that a growing awareness of consent and sexual assault put a damper on the lifestyle there as well. The stripped-down yet increasingly popular world of grunge and 90s alt-rock didn't exactly play to the excess of the 1980s groupie lifestyle. According to John Walters of Newsweek, his visit to a concert backstage in December 1991 was decidedly tame. Maybe it's because he was with his sister, but the show included famous bands like the Red Hot Chili Peppers, Pearl Jam, and Nirvana. And despite the notoriety of the artists, no groupies were in sight on Walter's visit. Instead, he found Kurt Cobain standing around eating a bowl of cereal. Cobain's future wife, Courtney Love, was in attendance, but of course she was a musician in her own right with a soon-to-be-released album and her own professional acclaim. Whether it's Patty Boyd or Yoko Ono, the partners of famous musicians have inspired countless love songs. But sometimes a groupie can be the muse for a classic tune, as Jimi Hendrix, the Rolling Stones, and many others know all too well. While countless groupies have complicated legacies, there's perhaps none more complicated than the one left behind by Kathy Smith. In 1982, she gave an interview in which she confessed to administering a fatal dose of heroin and cocaine to John Belushi, leading to a second-degree murder conviction. About a decade before that, she transitioned from traveling with the group that would later become the Band to reconnecting with a singer who she previously had an affair with, Gordon Lightfoot. At the time they became serious, Lightfoot was divorced, but according to Nicholas Jennings' biography Lightfoot, their relationship was anything but easy. That said, Smith's tendency to flirt with anyone who caught her eye meant that trust really wasn't part of the relationship. The pair were living in a small town outside of Toronto when one night Smith drove into the city to party with some friends. Lightfoot grew worried about what she might be doing without him and sat down to write a song about her.
You gotta work on the idea before you start working on the song.
The singer explained in Jennings' book, "I was hoping that no one else would get their hands on her because she was pretty good looking." The song was Sundown, and it would become one of Lightfoot's biggest hits. Part of being a groupie in the 1970s involved promoting the acts they had attached themselves to, and that's what Linda Keith did with Jimi Hendrix. At the time she met Hendrix, she was involved with another famous name, Keith Richards. Does it get complicated? Absolutely. Keith told The Guardian that she first saw Hendrix in New York and was instantly captivated. Keith would later be immortalized in the Hendrix song Send My Love to Linda, in which he wrote, "Send my love to Linda. She lit a fire way down inside. She made the sun shine in my eye. God, let me hold her once more before I die." That's an absolutely beautiful tribute, but it's not the only one she had written to her. She was also the inspiration behind the Rolling Stones' Ruby Tuesday. Richards would explain that the song was written after she left him, thus ending their 2-year relationship. Richards wrote in his autobiography Life, "That's the first time I felt the deep cut. The thing about being a songwriter is, even if you've been f***ed over, you can find consolation in writing about it and pour it out." Basically, Linda is Ruby Tuesday. Whole Lotta Rosie is one of AC/DC's best-known songs, but who exactly is Rosie? That's apparently been a question people have been asking for a long time, and while no Rosie ever came forward, it turns out that a little determination can lead to a lot of answers. Jesse Fink is the author of 2 books on the band, and in 2023 he published a blog post confirming that he had found the true identity of Rosie. The often-told tale is that Rosie was a regular at AC/DC shows, and after spending the night with lead singer Bon Scott, she boasted to him that he was the 29th famous person she'd slept with. Other details were non-existent until Fink was contacted by a source who explained that she had known the Rosie in question. Her name was Rosemarie Garcia, and she died in 1979. The source claimed that Garcia had dated Scott for around 6 months. The source further explained that she had been a sex worker whose death had been connected to heroin and drug use. That information led to the discovery of her death certificate, which confirmed that she had died when she was just 22 years old. If there is any musician who has lived a life that reads like a fictionalized version of a rock star, it's Jimi Hendrix.
Which is a groovy thing.
It's fitting then that the inspiration behind his famous Dolly dagger is just as incredible. And yes, she was a very real person named Devin Wilson. Wilson, the story goes, hooked up with Hendrix as not only his primary girl, but as the one getting everything the band needed. That, of course, meant drugs and other girls. Recording engineer Eddie Kramer, who worked with Hendrix, told Classic Rock, "Devin was a presence, very beautiful, very commanding, with quite an edge to her, but she was funny." Wilson, however, didn't have a happy ending to her story. In 1971, she was killed when she fell out of a window at the Chelsea Hotel. Bodies by the Sex Pistols is a pretty dark song. It starts, "She was a girl from Birmingham. She just had an abortion. She was a case of insanity. Her name was Pauline. She lived in a tree. She was a no one who killed her baby." Contrary to the lyrics, though, Pauline wasn't just no one. She was a very real someone. She's mentioned in the Sex Pistols biopic Pistol, and when the Cinemaholic did a deep dive into whether or not she was a real person, they confirmed that she was. Pauline was a punk rock groupie with a horrifying background. Committed to a mental institution in northern England, she was said to have been sexually assaulted by an employee before fleeing to London and establishing herself in the underground punk scene. And as to the abortion reference in the song, well, the Sex Pistols singer John Lydon has said that it's inspired by her story too. Lydon explained, "She'd tell me about getting pregnant by the male nurses at the asylum or whatever. There isn't much more that's known about the woman that inspired Bodies, and even though the story was backed up by other members of the group, much of Pauline's story remains shrouded in mystery." Groupies are, of course, well known for their sexual liaisons, even though many will say that's only a small part of what being a groupie means.
Groupies sleep with rock stars because they want to be near someone famous. We're here because of the music.
So who was John Cale referring to when he wrote these lyrics? The bugger in the short sleeves f***ed my wife. Did it quick and split. Back home, fresh as a daisy to Maisie. Oh, Maisie. His wife at the time was Cynthia Sue Wells, who was one of the members of the GTOs, the Frank Zappa assembled group made up entirely of groupies. The story goes that Cal wrote the song called Guts, and it was absolutely meant to be a shot at industry staple Kevin Ayers. Ayers and Wells hooked up at around the same time the live album was recorded, which Cale knew about. By writing the song, Cale wanted Ayers to know that the affair with his wife wasn't the sort of thing that was going to be swept under the rug. Look back through the music industry and it quickly becomes clear that there are a lot of things that are deeply troubling, particularly the idea of the baby groupie, which includes girls as young as 12 and 13. And it's not as if it was an industry secret. For instance, when Iggy Pop wrote Look Away about Sable Starr, it didn't really leave much room for interpretation. Pop sang, "I slept with Sable when she was 13. Her parents were too rich to do anything. She rocked her way around LA till a New York doll carried her away." When fellow baby groupie Lori Maddox talked to Thrillist in 2015, she said that Starr had already firmly established herself in the groupie scene by the time they met. They were both 14, and at the time, Starr was involved with Iggy Pop. Maddox recalled her own involvement with David Bowie and how it drove a wedge between the two, a scene that would play out again with Jimmy Page. Maddox shared some insight as to what it was like in the cutthroat circle, saying, "Especially after the Bowie incident, I was truly afraid Sable would beat me up, kill me, crucify me, 86 me out of Hollywood. She was the queen of the groupies." There's little question as to the song that was inspired by Patty D'Arbanville. After all, her name is right in the song title. Lady D'Arbanville was a single off Cat Stevens' 1970 album Mona Bone Chacon, in which she sang, "My Lady D'Arbanville, why does it drive me so? But your heart seems so silent, why do you breathe so low?" According to the official story on CatStevens.com, Stevens and D'Arbanville were in a serious relationship. It ended with her returning to the US. Stevens later wrote a song about her, which she sang to D'Arbanville over the phone. She said on the website, "I cried when I heard it because that's when I knew it was over for good." D'Arbanville ultimately stayed in the groupie scene and became a good friend and trusted companion of groupie mainstay Pamela Des Barres.
Yeah, a lot of times you just want to be backstage, just involved in that scene. It's so exciting.
In Des Barres' book, Let's Spend the Night Together, there's a whole chapter dedicated to D'Arbanville. In it, Des Barres says that it was the song Lady D'Arbanville that had first intrigued her, and that she later got the whole story behind it. As the story goes, D'Arbanville had been dating a friend of Stevens when she met him. The relationship had lasted for about a year until she realized that Stevens was actually in love with her. D'Arbanville recalled in the book, "It freaked me out. I was feeling like I couldn't give him what he wanted. I felt trapped." In Pamela Des Barres' Let's Spend the Night Together, Patty D'Arbanville described Kathryn James as the most beautiful creature she had ever laid eyes on. Des Barres says there was quite a bit of hostile competition between her and James, at least initially. It was perhaps predictably over Jimmy Page, but Des Barres says he was just the beginning. James was associated with names like Denny Lane and the Moody Blues. However, it was John Mayall who wrote a song about her called Miss James. Mayall wrote, "I read about her in the magazine. The writer painted her in colors of a queen. Other people said bad things instead, so I was curious to check up what I'd read. But asking around, she couldn't be found. Strange, elusive Miss James." Jackson Browne's Under the Falling Sky was also inspired by James. She had a young son by Lane at the time she and Brown got together. James has said that she and Brown were head over heels in love when he wrote the song for her. It wouldn't last, however, as James ultimately left him. Julia Holcomb was 16 when she set her sights on Aerosmith frontman Steven Tyler. In 2022, however, Holcomb sued Tyler, claiming he sexually assaulted her as a minor, among other charges. Holcomb said in a statement, "I want this action to expose an industry that protects celebrity offenders, to cleanse and hold accountable an industry that both exploited and allowed me to be exploited for years, along with so many other naive and vulnerable kids and adults." Holcomb's claims are largely supported by Tyler's 2011 memoir, which Holcomb says convinced her to come forward with her own statement about the events. This includes Tyler allegedly forcing her to have a late-term abortion.
"I told him that I wanted my baby, and that even if he didn't want to marry me, I still wanted to keep my child."
She's also said that he wrote a song about her, Seasons of Wither, which was released on the Get Your Wings album. Tyler wrote, "Oh, woe is me, I feel so badly for you. Oh, woe is me, I feel so sadly for you in time. Bound to lose your mind, live on borrowed time. Take the wind right out of your sail." Tyler, meanwhile, has said that the song was inspired by late-night walks down darkened roads. However, Holcomb has said that the song's devil was Tyler, and that she was the blues-hearted lady. Anita Pallenberg is perhaps music's best example of a groupie whose influence on a band was undeniable. Her impact on shaping the look and sound of the Rolling Stones has been acknowledged for a long time, and according to The Guardian, she was also the inspiration for one of their most famous songs, Gimme Shelter. Keith Richards wrote about the song's genesis in his 2010 autobiography Life, saying that he had written it after Pallenberg acted in a movie that included some steamy sex scenes with Mick Jagger. The whole thing had put him in a pretty ferocious mood. Richards wrote in his book, "It was just a terrible day, this incredible storm over London, so I got into that mode looking at all these people running like hell." That wasn't the only song that Pallenberg would influence, and she was also said to be the trippy lady of She's a Rainbow. In the lyrics, the song asks, "Have you seen her in all gold, like a queen in days of old? She shoots colors all around, like a sunset going down. Have you seen a lady fairer?" Morgana Welch was part of the baby groupie scene that centered around Los Angeles. In an interview with Please Kill Me, she said that they didn't even know they'd been dubbed the LA Queens until Led Zeppelin released the song Sick Again in 1975. Fast forward to the 21st century in a post-Me Too world, and the song is kind of hard to listen to. It includes lyrics like this: "Come on, flash it in my eyes. Said you dug me since you were 13, then you giggle as you heave and sigh." According to Welch, the 1970s were a magical time when the biggest music fans could get up close and personal with all their favorite musicians. She went on to add that it was also a time when women were becoming very independent, unlike in previous eras. Welch is one of the many who condemned the double standard that exists between men and women and said that she has no regrets about her days as a groupie. She told Please Kill Me, "It's what I did consciously and loved every minute of it. Thinking back, I would have done it more." In Rolling Stone's 1975 interview with Robert Plant and Jimmy Page, it was Plant to explain what the song meant, saying, "The words show I feel a bit sorry for them. One minute she's 12 and the next minute she's 13 and over the top. Such a shame. They haven't got the style that they had in the old days." From marrying rock star royalty to writing tell-all memoirs, these famous groupies lived a very rock and roll life. So where are they now? Penny Lane Trumbull is one of the most famous groupies in history, thanks to filmmaker Cameron Crowe. Right down to her name, she was the inspiration for the groupie character Penny Lane, played by Kate Hudson in Crowe's 2000 rock comedy drama Almost Famous. That rock comedy drama was about one of the best fictional rock bands of all time, Stillwater, and the various people around them, including young music journalist William Miller, based on Crowe himself. The real Trumbull and Crowe had a very similar relationship to their fictional counterparts.
You're too sweet for rock and roll.
Though fellow groupie Pamela Des Barres also claimed that the character was based on her, Crowe has confirmed that the fictional Penny Lane is based on the real Trumbull. In a 2022 interview with SiriusXM, Crowe said, "She, the real Penny Lane, is a woman named Penny Trumbull, and she's still consistent to the same person that I met in the day. She's in love with the music. It was all about the music. She never wrote a tell-all book. I think DreamWorks paid her a little bit of money for her life rights." After leaving the groupie life behind her, Trumbull returned to ordinary life and had a stellar career in marketing and consulting, with a side hustle in farming. Pamela Des Barres, aka Miss Pamela, was a musician herself thanks to her Frank Zappa-created band the GTOs. However, she's best known as a prominent groupie who was a part of the 1960s and 1970s rock scene, both in London and in the US. She was associated with some of the biggest rock names of the era, including members of Led Zeppelin and the Who drummer Keith Moon, who tragically died in 1978. She even ended up marrying and later divorcing Michael Des Barres of Silverhead and the Power Station fame. Decades after her heyday, Des Barres remains proud of her groupie days. In fact, she's leveraged her experiences in the rock circles into a many-faceted career as a writer and content creator. In 1987, she published the best-selling memoir, I'm With the Band, Confessions of a Groupie, which detailed her life and times with many of history's biggest rock musicians. She has also written several other books, teaches in women's writing workshops, arranges Los Angeles rock tours based on her memoir, and has a podcast where some of her old acquaintances turn up as guests. Model, singer, and mother to Liv Tyler, Bebe Buell isn't exactly your average groupie. In fact, she dislikes the term quite intensely, preferring the term muse instead. Buell's fondness for rock music and rock musicians led to dating major names like Aerosmith's Steven Tyler to perhaps most famously Todd Rundgren. Buell's rock and roll relationships eventually transitioned into a music career of her own, starting with the short-lived rock group Bebe Buell and the B-Sides in 1981. Buell has released music since then, and her most recent album, Bearing It All, came out in 2018. Because she's been doing this so much longer than the dating rock stars thing she's more closely associated with, she's understandably more interested in discussing her music than her personal life from several decades ago. Buell named the single biggest misconception about her to Classic Rock in 2016, stating, "That I'm defined by the cool boyfriends I had in the 70s. I've done so many other things. Nowadays, I just say to people, come see me live and I will change your mind." Cherry Vanilla's 2010 memoir, Lick Me, How I Became Cherry Vanilla, openly describes her as a groupie, so it's clear she doesn't exactly disavow the term. In reality, however, she's always been more of a pop culture jack-of-all-trades. Born Kathleen Doherty, she worked as an ad producer and DJ before she relocated from New York to London and started her groupie phase, which in turn led to her first stage acting gig in Andy Warhol's play Pork and working as David Bowie's publicist in the mid-1970s. Apart from her acting and PR endeavors, Cherry Vanilla became a musician, a poet, and a notable figure in the punk movement. She released 2 albums and a number of singles in the late 1970s featuring Sting and Stuart Copeland from The Police. Outside the music and acting scenes, Cherry Vanilla has worked in various capacities with a truly eclectic collection of creative greats, from jazz legend Chet Baker to filmmaker Tim Burton. Daring, debaucherous, and a party behind every stage, rock and roll wouldn't be what it was without the women who hung with the bands. But even some of the best-known groupies faded away with little to no acknowledgement. In a 2019 TV interview, Connie Hamsey recalled,
I was determined to become a famous groupie.
and she did just that. She attended almost every rock concert that came through Little Rock, Arkansas in the 1970s and beyond. She also provided intimate entertainment for a great many of those musicians and their roadies.
She claims to have had sex with more rock stars than you can shake a drumstick at.
When she was 15, she had an encounter with Steppenwolf drummer Jerry Edmonton. The first on a list that she says includes Keith Moon, John Bonham, 2/3 of Rush, Don Henley, both Van Halen brothers, Huey Lewis, Peter Frampton, all of ZZ Top, Neil Diamond, most of Kiss, Dan Fogelberg and his manager, and the Allman Brothers. Hamzy was immortalized in Grand Funk Railroad's 1973 hit We're an American Band with the lines, "Sweet, sweet Connie do interact. She had the whole show, and that's a natural fact." Hamzy eventually retreated into private life, and when she died in August 2021, Little Rock's Arkansas Democrat Gazette tentatively reported the death. The funeral home didn't wish to be quoted and referred media to Hamzy's parents, who had both died years earlier. The relatives made reference to Hamzy's death on social media. Her cousin, Rita Ann Lawrence, said, "Connie was a character. She was very colorful. She was always in the news." Hamzy was 66 years old. In Legs McNeil and Gillian McCain's punk oral history Please Kill Me, Sable Starr said she was a young troublemaker when she attended her first rock show in Hollywood at the behest of a friend. Among musicians, she was known as a baby groupie who'd use a fake ID to get into shows at venues such as the Whiskey A Go-Go and Rainbow Bar and Grill. Starr reportedly lost her virginity to Randy California of the band Spirit, and by the age of 16, Starr was a regular companion to Iggy Pop, Johnny Thunders of the New York Dolls, and David Bowie. She also had encounters with members of Roxy Music and the Jay Giles Band. Sable Shields, that's Sable Starr's real name, eventually settled in the Reno, Nevada area where she lived with her partner and 2 children. For the last 16 years of her life, she worked at a local casino resort. Starr died from a brain tumor in April 2009. She was 51 years old. While still in high school in La Jolla, California in the late 1970s, would-be model and actor Tawny Katane dated Robin Crosby, a member of the band Phenomenon. She and Crosby moved in together when she was 15 or 16 years old, and she worked as the band's stylist and hairstylist. When Phenomenon evolved into Rat, Katane posed for the covers of their first 2 releases, Rat EP in 1983 and Out of the Cellar in 1984. Katane and Crosby split up in the mid-1980s, and she began a relationship with Van Halen's tour manager, Pete Angelis. It lasted 3 years, during which time Katane began an acting career, appearing in Bachelor Party with Tom Hanks and in the iconic video for Here I Go Again, a #1 hit for Whitesnake in 1987. Soon after, she married Whitesnake lead singer David Coverdale and starred in 3 more Whitesnake videos. The marriage lasted 2 years. In May 2021, the Office of the Orange County Coroner told media outlets that Katane died at her Newport Beach, California home. An autopsy showed that she died from heart disease, exacerbated by hardened arteries and prescription drug use. Tawny Katane was 59. Elvis Presley emerged as one of the first real rock and roll superstars in the 1950s. And Presley associate Tura Satana also made history as one of the first rock and roll groupies. The Japan-born, Chicago-raised Satana modeled nude and worked as an exotic dancer. In her routine, she danced and stripped with a Buddha statue. The act transfixed Presley, and they began a physical relationship. In an interview with the San Francisco Chronicle, Satana recalled, "He was a very considerate lover and the old-type Southern gentleman. She claimed he proposed marriage, and she said no. But when Presley did marry, he reportedly urged wife Priscilla Presley to adopt Satana's beehive and ponytail hairstyles and thick eye makeup. Satana later carried on a relationship with former baseball superstar Joe DiMaggio after the end of his marriage to Marilyn Monroe. In 1965, she starred in cult classic B-movie Faster Pussycat Kill Kill.
Sounds like my motor being revved up, which makes twice today.
Satana's manager confirmed that her client died on February 4, 2011. The former groupie and actor died of heart failure at a Reno, Nevada hospital at the age of 72. At age 16, Kathy Smith left school in her home in Burlington, Ontario. In a bar in nearby Hamilton, she saw a performance by a band called the Hawks, whose members would later find success as the band. Smith connected with multiple Hawks, including Rick Dango, Levon Helm, and Richard Manuel. At age 17, Smith gave birth to a baby whom she placed into adoption. She claimed the child was Helm's, which he denied. Smith then carried on a tumultuous 3-year-long affair with married singer-songwriter Gordon Lightfoot. Afterward, while singing and writing for Hoyt Axton's band, she started taking drugs like cocaine and heroin. She moved into dealing to celebrities, including John Belushi. It was Smith who injected Belushi with the heroin and cocaine that led to his fatal overdose at the Chateau Marmont Hotel in Hollywood in 1982. Smith was questioned and released by police, but was charged after a damning interview with the National Enquirer in which she said, "I killed John Belushi. I didn't mean to, but I am responsible." Smith pleaded guilty to involuntary manslaughter and drug charges, served 15 months in prison, and was deported back to Canada. In September 2020, the British Columbia Coroner's Service informed media outlets that Smith had died of undisclosed causes on August 16th in the town of Maple Ridge. After suffering from health issues for years, Smith died at age 73. Better known by the nickname derived from her artistic pursuit and groupie-adjacent hobby, Cynthia Plastercaster Albritton was immortalized in Kiss's 1977 song Plastercaster. In 1968, inspired by her art classes at Chicago's University of Illinois, she approached Jimi Hendrix backstage and asked to make a plaster reproduction of his reproductive anatomy. He was the first of many. Using dental molding compound, Albritton cast dozens of rock star genitals, including members of the MC5, the Dead Kennedys, and Journey. And in case you're wondering, she used whatever means she had at her disposal to ensure her models were at full attention. She'd later exhibit her work at art galleries and in a documentary. After a decades-long career as a celebrated one-of-a-kind rock music side character, Albritton returned home to Chicago. She died in April 2022 from an undisclosed illness. Albritton was 74. In 1964, 15-year-old Judith Peters left her family home for San Francisco, changed her name to Miss Mercy after Don Covey's song Mercy Mercy, and started to dress in a Victorian fashion, inspired by her friends in a band called the Charlatans. Within a year, she was hanging out with the likes of Brian Jones and Keith Richards of the Rolling Stones, and soon became close friends with Christine Furka, an employee of Frank Zappa. When Zappa met Mercy, he added her to a band he was putting together. That band, Girls Together Outrageously or the GTOs, consisted of 7 women, all of them big players on the LA groupie scene of the late 1960s and early 1970s. Mercy appeared on the GTO's only album, Permanent Damage, and then resumed hanging out and working with rock stars including Graham Parsons, Jimi Hendrix, Arthur Lee of Love, and guitarist Shugi Otis, to whom she was briefly married. In July 2020, Pamela DeBar announced on her Instagram account that her friend, bandmate, and fellow ex-groupie Miss Mercy had died. The former Judith Peters had been ill for years before dying at the age of 71. On the day of her high school graduation in 1967, Christine Furka set out for Hollywood and wound up part of a loose collection of artists in the Laurel Canyon neighborhood.
California was like this legendary paradise.
With fellow groupie Pamela DeBar, she became part of a roving support dance crew called Vito's Dancers. They played parties, clubs, and gigs around Los Angeles, which led to a job as housekeeper, secretary, and nanny for Frank Zappa and his family. When Zappa put together the GTOs, a supergroup made up entirely of well-known groupies, he included Miss Christine. Among Miss Christine's other 1970s musical connections, she inspired Alice Cooper, appeared on the album art for Zappa's Hot Rats and Todd Rundgren's Runt, and dated singer-songwriter Arthur Brown, Russell Mael of Sparks, and David Robinson of the Modern Lovers, whom she was visiting in Massachusetts at the time of her death. Born with a spinal deformity that led to a number of health issues, Miss Christine was outfitted with a corrective body cast in 1972. Just after it was removed, she was found dead from a drug overdose, likely a mixture of pentobarbital and quaaludes. Miss Christine was 22. In Bill Janowitz's 33 1/3, The Rolling Stones' Exile on Main Street, Barbara Cope, aka the Butter Queen, is remembered by rock legend Keith Richards. She did loads of wonderful things with butter, but what exactly? She gave an answer in a 1987 interview on the Oprah Winfrey Show.
Well, my answer to that is those who know, and those who don't wish they did.
During that same interview, it came out that David Cassidy claimed to have been with 2,000 women. Winfrey then asked Cope for her number. Cope began her groupie life in 1965 at shows in her hometown of Dallas, then moved out west. She toured with Jimi Hendrix, Traffic, and Joe Cocker, and spent time with members of the New Riders of the Purple Sage, the Beatles, and the Rolling Stones. When Led Zeppelin played Texas in 1973, singer Robert Plant asked the crowd about the whereabouts of the Butter Queen. Around that time, she appeared on the cover of Buddy magazine, billed as Dallas's leading groupie, and inspired a line in the 1972 Rolling Stones song Rip This Joint. Down to New Orleans with the Dixie Dean, crossed to Dallas, Texas with the Butter Queen. After living large for a few years, Cope left the music scene at the age of 22 and retired to private life in Dallas. In January 2018, Cope's home caught fire. Authorities found her body near the front porch. Barbara Cope, the Butter Queen, was 67.